Well, good morning. It is Thursday, May 28th. I am Heather E. Clausen, pastor of Bethel Lutheran Church and the United Methodist Church, both in Herman, Minnesota. This morning I'm going to be reading from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, beginning at verse 13. I am also going to be sharing the words of a couple others this morning. This is a sober day. We reached, I guess you'd call it a milestone, a place of sadness when our deaths in this country from COVID-19 reached 100,000. I want to set what is going on as this letter is written to this church at Thessalonica. Thessalonica is a bustling community back in this time. It's a center of trade, and it was the Roman capital in Macedonia. It also then was a locus, a center of the worship of the Greek and Roman deities. The believers, the followers of Jesus, and those that they drew to them as they shared the teachings, were at extreme risk because of their unwillingness to bow and worship not only the Greek and Roman deities, but also those of the royalty, those of the leadership in Rome, especially the emperor, who were considered deities. They refused to worship anyone, anything other than the God, the one God that they knew through Jesus Christ. And so Paul writes this letter right after a visit by Timothy, who has found the community to be holding strong. And he writes to encourage them and to confirm their faith, but also give them the courage to stand firm and not be swayed by the authority of Rome or the worship that they would do in that community of other than the one true God. But he is also cautioning them to not be complicit in the systems of domination that were a part of their time. Words and cautions that, sadly, we still need to hear today. So I'll read just these two verses, on chapter 4, verses 13 and 14. But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about those who have died, so you may not grieve as others do, who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have died. So this morning, I'm going to share words that are not my own. They come from Jim Wallace of Sojourners, and his writing is titled Lament, A Day to Mourn. He begins with the definitions. Lament as a verb, to feel, show, or express grief, sorrow, or regret, to mourn deeply, as a noun. A crying out in grief, wailing. These are his words. As we pass the horrifying milestone of 100,000 American deaths to the coronavirus, we're using the hashtag about Lament 100K to urge people to pause, to lament. Of course, that statement falls short, As a friend said to me, we cannot abbreviate all these lives. We have to try to feel all 100,000 of them. 100,000 people is 500 plane crashes with 200 passengers on board each one. There have only been 33 airplane crashes with 200 or more fatalities in world history. 33 times the number of deaths on 9/11. 2 sold-out baseball stadiums, 25 filled national cathedrals, nearly the number of U.S. soldiers killed in World War I, and almost 15 times the number of U.S. soldiers killed in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. If a COVID-19 memorial were built today and no one else in the U.S. died from the virus, it would need to be almost twice the length of the Vietnam War Memorial Wall to fit the names of all that our nation has lost. 100,000 neighbors, friends, and families, grandfathers and grandmothers, fathers and mothers, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, even children, all now dead from COVID-19. It is a marker we must not pass by quickly or easily. We must stop. We must weep. We must mourn. We must honor. And we must lament, which is to feel and bear great grief and sorrow and reflect upon it. To pray for the healing of the nation is to go even deeper than our horrible sickness. We must also see the national brokenness and signs of hope the virus continues to reveal. Our suffering has been painfully racially disproportionate, but our healing must be in unison. To lament means more than weeping and mourning. It also includes regret. To ask, why has this happened? To understand that it didn't have to be this way, that we could have been better, smarter, fairer, more compassionate, and just. As we mark the deaths of 100,000 people in the U.S. from COVID-19, an unprecedented group of 100 national faith leaders from Christian, Jewish, and Muslim traditions, representing major denominations, national faith-based organizations, local congregations, and millions of people of faith across the country are acting together. We have decided to mourn the dead and pray for healing in our respective worship services on May 29th, 30th, and 31st. And together we look to federal, state, and local elected officials to observe Monday, June 1st, as a national day of mourning and lament, a time marked by moments of silence, lowering of flags, interfaith vigils and prayers, ringing of bells, and civic memorials. The unity across our faith lines and differences within our own traditions has been amazing to see and blessed to experience. To come together as our churches, to reach out to our Jewish and Muslim friends, and to appeal to our elected officials with a national hunger for a day of mourning and lament has been a deep encouragement and sign of hope for me. It's also been a blessing to see the U.S. Conference of Mayors join us in these efforts, to use the opportunity to strengthen and grow connections with their local interfaith groups. The National Bipartisan Mayors Conference joined us in announcing today that they are supporting the Conference of Mayors that represents over 1,400 mayors across the country. And the National Governors Association is inviting governors to take part. He continues with some listing of some of the ways in which we can do that. He says, we will ask God to help heal our land with a moment of mourning and honoring those many who have died, often without their loved ones around them. We come together both to weep and to rejoice for those lives which have been lost. We shall mourn the loss of so many Americans, many known only to family and friends, co-workers and neighbors. We will mourn family members and friends who we have loved, worked, and worshiped with, ate, played, and prayed with, important members of our communities, some who are on the front lines caring for and serving others. and those we passed on the street with a smile and a nod. By God's grace, we will mourn with families who have not been able to memorialize, mourn, or properly bury their COVID dead. Our lament will also honor hard truths that we have learned during this pandemic. Our suffering has been unequal. Elders have been vulnerable and alone. Black and brown neighbors have borne disproportionately both the brunt of sickness and death and the frontline labor of fighting this disease. Native communities, our land's original caretakers, have been particularly hard hit, as they have been so many times in the past. Asian Americans have been targeted by hateful words and actions. Our prayers for healing of the nation must acknowledge the brokenness of our democracy and rededicate ourselves to repair the injustices this pandemic has revealed, even as work for the healing of those who are afflicted with the virus. This momentous and tragic 100,000 marker will not be an empty data point on death's grim graph. Rather, we will remember those whom we loved and pray for both healing and hope for our nation and the world. As a people, we have borne this pandemic's cost in the lives of our loved ones. As a nation, we shall honor and mourn them together. As faith leaders, we must help to lead our congregations, communities, and countries in this time of grief and lament in a way that will lead us forward more united as a country to address the very real challenges we face ahead. And we must do that together. So Monday, June 1st, will be designated as a time to lament. Not just a number, but all the lives that are lost. I want to close this morning with words from Bishop Charleston, a member of a Choctaw Nation, and I think these words are appropriate. Last night, I saw myself standing on Nanaweya, the most holy mound of my people, the place of origin of my nation. There the flowering tree stood, the sign of the covenant from the Spirit that this was our promised land. Then a breeze came, and slowly the blossoms began to fall gently like snowflakes, pink and white. They drifted all around me. 100,000 blossoms, quietly coming to rest on the sacred ground. And I wept, for I knew each blossom was a soul, a life lost before its time, beloved of a grieving family, falling like snow on a land that will embrace them forever. Amen.